Today's episode of the Occasional Podcast is brought to you by Zoo Audio, waging a revolution in American hi-fi since 2000. Zoo's responsive, highly efficient loudspeakers pack massive tone and shove to bring recorded music to life like never before. And Zoo cables bring the same. Check out the Union 6 and Union 6 Supreme and get a first look at the upcoming Definition 6 at ZUAUDIO.com. That's ZUAUDIO.com. The giant walrus said hello. Hello, folks. Hello, folks. Let me get my levels right here. Sorry, everyone. Whoa. Hello. Hello, folks. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. It's Mark and Brian on the podcast.
Hey.
You've reached the Occasional Podcast, Episode 1, Season 8, the Season 8 opener.
I feel honored to be on the season premiere of this.
The season premiere. And you know what, guys? This episode is all about Marc Phillips,
our
international traveler. It's all about him, his experience, because you know why? He's been around the block. And we're all kind of cramped up for a while in our homes, being safe. And recently, if you've been following the show, you know that the high-end audiophile show scene has been reignited. And along those lines, we have traveled near and far to bring you the new product releases, our impressions. I've been to a couple shows myself already, and Mark just got back from one, which will be the focus of this, is a relatively new show called Pacific Audio Fest. I believe, Mark, this was the first time of the show.
It's spanking new. This was the first one. It was supposed to start back in 2020. And obviously it didn't, and then they tried 2021, and they didn't, and then 2022, I almost thought they were going to announce that it was going to go through, but it happened. It totally happened. In Seattle, audio show, very, very interesting show on a lot of perspectives, but overall, good show.
And that's our podcast. Thanks
you
for
very
tuning
much.
in, guys.
Next year you should go.
So, I myself got to go to the Emotiva and Shit Audio Get Together Audio Roundup, I believe they called the Shit Emotiva Texas Audio Roundup was for me 2 weeks ago, if you're listening to this relatively soon after it goes out. And that was a really interesting experience for me. It was actually quite a bit of a smaller show, 2 floors of basically just headphone and 2-channel vendors, good mix between the two. It was free. That one was completely free. And, I got to go there and experience some new Emotiva speakers that are coming out. They have some new floor standers. And then some of these new Shit Audio products they had come out with. They have a new version of one of their headphone amps, their giant 10-tube headphone amp. Yeah. And there was a lot of good sounds. What was unusual about that show was that there was no price for admission. It was Austin, Texas, in a hotel, which a lot of these are. 2 floors of vendors. So not the biggest thing, but really tight attendance and really fun, generous hosting by Shit Audio and Emotiva. That was basically my experience. The other thing I wanted to catch up with you guys on before we head into Mark's show coverage is the recent host of speakers that we've got, because I know Mark does a lot of reviews for Part-Time Audiophile, and if you want to see more of his written stuff, check out PartTimeAudiophile.com. At the top, they have all of his reviews. Well, we do a lot of reviews on my end as well, and we have a ton of speakers coming in and out of the show, and my thing, and I'll tell you what, it's been really eye-opening and fun, because we've done a lot more floor standers than I usually do. A couple years back, I did a bunch of bookshelf reviews, so smaller bookshelf, stand mount style.
I feel like you're talking for both of us, because it's the same thing with me. All of a sudden, I've got big floor standers in here,
and that evolved because I'm looking at stand mount speakers, And I'm saying, well, realistically, this is the same footprint as a floor stander with the stand included at the same height. So why don't I just move on to floor standers for some of the same brands? So I got some floor standers coming in, and I've just been very excited about that. So we'll keep you abreast on all those discoveries. But, we got some new ZUAUDIO stuff in. We got some QLN stuff in. We got some Von Schweikert, which I know you guys know we talk about all the time on the show. But
I'm going to talk about them today, in fact.
Oh, are you?
Well, they were there.
So I actually was lucky enough to get a pair in the house here, floor standers, and let me tell you, they don't disappoint. So I am super excited to relay that information to you. But we'll keep that for a future podcast in terms of kind of those impressions and what happens with the outcome. Today's show is also brought to you by The Voice That Is. Doug White is an award-winning dealer that has assembled a refined selection of elite brands featuring Tidal Audio, Doman Audio, Audion Audio, Graceline cables, and more. Providing personalized service, TVTI's carefully selected brands are from the finest companies in the world, each of which are at the top of their category and represents exceptional high quality, performance, value, and above all, musicality. Check out a full list of all Doug's world-class products at www.TheVoiceThatIs.com. Yeah, so Mark and I are a wealth of information in terms of reviews, and you can keep an eye on both the site and the podcast here for the upcoming season for some of that feedback and some of those reviews. Now, Mark,
yes,
let's get into the show.
Let's get into it.
Tell me about, how was the flight out to Pacific Audio Fest? What city was it in, first of all? The Pacific is a big area.
It was in Seattle, and I did not fly. I drove from Portland, which is only a 3-hour drive. So if I could drive in less than a day, I drive it. I don't fly. But yeah, it was easy. 3 hours from here to SeaTac, and the venue was the SeaTac DoubleTree. And I'll talk a little bit more about the venue itself.
A shout out for the DoubleTree. Did you get the cookies, the walnut cookies?
It was amazing how many of those cookies were offered to me. While during my stay, if I walked by, there were practically people tripping me to give me a cookie. So it was very easy to get all the cookies you could possibly eat. And yes, they were delicious. I'll say that. I'll say the cookies were good. Maybe one of the highlights of the show.
Oh,
no.
Oh. I'll tell you what, because they had the cookies at the Shit Audio, Emotiva, Texas Audio Roundup was at a DoubleTree as well. And they had the cookies. And I was like, you know what? They're pretty good. Like the first batch I got was warmed up.
Yeah,
Probably too many.
Yeah, no, they were definitely good cookies. They should be proud of those cookies. It isn't like they're just doing the Otis Spunkmeyer that has the little toaster oven and you make them there. It was like
yes.
No, I felt like they had some dessert chef back there making these beauties. They were just amazing.
It's so funny that you say the Otis Spunkmeyer thing because I feel like I know exactly what you're talking about, like those pre-made cookies they put in like a toaster oven.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they're available at like the 7-Eleven or
AM,
something
PM.
Weird like that.
It was always AM, PM. I remember it was some hotel chain a while ago where they had the little Otis Spunkmeyer toaster oven behind the front desk, and they're warm, but no, this was a cut above this. This is something probably a little closer to, I don't want to say Mrs. Fields, but just damn good cookie. Let's just say that the DoubleTree makes a damn good cookie.
Did I promise reviews, people? Here's your
this was a commercial for
the cookie review.
This was a commercial for the DoubleTree cookie. You will enjoy your stay.
We should get them as a sponsor on the show. I feel like that'd be great.
The best way to enjoy your stay. Cookie.
Mark,
yes,
a.k.a. Cookie Monster's brother. What kind of struck you first? Did you get there on the setup day? Did you get there to like check out people putting them? How was setup day?
Okay, so setup day was. Here's the thing about the actual venue, and it came forward on setup day. We've been experiencing a heat wave in the Pacific Northwest, just like much of the rest of the country, but it's a rare thing to happen in the Pacific Northwest. And originally, when I thought about going to Seattle in August, I said, or it was late July, it was July 29th through 31st, I said, oh, summer's going to be great. It's going to be 75 degrees. It's just going to be wonderful. No, 100-degree days. And if you know anything about the Pacific Northwest, they always say, oh, we don't need air conditioning up here. Well, you do, because there's lots of days where it's over 100 degrees. And in this particular case, it was like many of the rooms did not have working AC, including mine. And, when I rolled in...
What?
When I rolled in...
You've got to be kidding me.
Yeah, it was brutal. And it reminded me of Munich, because I had the same problem in Munich, where it was just...
Yes, I was just going to say
it was warm and swampy.
This reminds me of Munich.
This is just it's like, I want audio shows to be like chilly. I want to have to need a jacket sitting there. I don't know what it is, but it's like hot and sweaty. So the first day or so we're talking about Thursday night setup night into the first day of the show, it was just hot and sweaty, and I just didn't want to be in rooms, because then everybody turns off their air conditioning in the room so that the air conditioner doesn't make noise, because they'll tell you like you have to always make that trade-off when you're doing a room. It's like, I'm going to make everybody hot and sweaty, or are they going to complain about the noise of the air conditioning? And the best thing to do is just kind of turn on and turn it off whenever you can. But in this case, I just felt like the first day or so, it was just brutal. But as the show went on during the weekend, it did start to cool off. And I did get a second room that had air conditioning. So at that point, it became much more enjoyable.
I don't know what's going on with you, Mark. It's like this thing is following you around.
I feel like, you go to Europe and they say, oh, we don't like air conditioning in Europe because it's bad for you. And I'm like, no, it's not. it's how I keep my sanity, man.
So, but the vibe overall was pretty good with the vendors. Everybody's getting set up, the rooms. Everybody seemed pretty happy with all that. Because as we talked about in previous episodes, setup day can be a tense day for a lot of people.
So it probably was, just for the simple fact that on Friday, the first 3 or 4 rooms I went to were problematic. So I walk into these first rooms for the show, and I'm starting my coverage and everything, and I'm like, that wasn't that great. That wasn't that great. That wasn't that great. And I said, and after the 3rd or 4th room, you start thinking, this, it's one of those venues where the rooms just don't sound good. But after about 4 or 5 rooms, all of a sudden I heard a really good room. And then it seemed like every single room after that sounded really exceptional. And so I have a lot of rooms that sounded great. And this is going to go down for me as one of the strengths of the show was the room sounded really good. So at Expona earlier, we had a big venue and it was nice and big and well run. But at the same time, the rooms, I felt like I wasn't hearing the best sounding rooms on the high-end audio show circuit. When I went to Munich, and Munich is famous because it isn't really hotel rooms as much as cubicles and different kinds of spaces and a big giant convention floor. But what I noticed at Munich was the overall sound in the rooms was better, with the exception of the bleed through between the rooms. So you're talking about, you're sitting down and listening to some solo violin and you're hearing Wu-Tang in the next room. And so that's a big problem at shows, and they start wars. So the sound was good, but you heard the rest of the show. This show, Seattle, the Pacific Audio Fest, was a good balance of sound and also spacing out the rooms a bit and not having too much bleed through. And so that was the strength of the show right now. Heard a lot of good stuff. I do think because this was the inaugural event that there were obviously some issues that had popped up, and they kind of all lead back to the venue itself. So I kind of talked about the AC, the lack of AC probably put a few people, including me, into a bad mood to start off the show. One of the things, though, and it's the DoubleTree is a huge sprawling complex. And what happened is that you've got like a hallway over here, a couple of floors over here. There's some stuff over there. They were really far apart, and the signage wasn't all that brilliant. In fact, there were times... So what happened to me was I went through the show. I had the booklet, which I think had changed, from press time into, because there were a lot of last minute changes. And though the booklet, the directory wasn't that helpful. I would look for things and they wouldn't be listed because there was a lot of, like I said, last minute changes. By Saturday, and this was a show, it had 50 something rooms, and it was a decent sized show. It was bigger than I thought it was going to be. But I had it pretty wrapped up on Saturday night, and I said, wow, I could, either wrap this up or just hang out for Sunday. And on Saturday night, I went to go get something, meet somebody in a room, and I started walking down this corridor of, exhibit rooms, and I go, I haven't seen any of these rooms. And it's like, oh no, I'm going to have to stay for Sunday. And so that was the biggest problem, was that people couldn't find things. And even as I'm doing the coverage right now on social media and on our website, there are people who are writing back to me and commenting. It's like, oh, I totally missed that. Where was that? So that's an issue they're going to have to solve. And I heard Louis Hinckley address that. Louis Hinckley of Daedalus Audio was one of the show organizers, along with Gary Gill. He had heard that from a lot of people, and he said, please tell me, give me feedback. We want to make this better year after year. And so that was the first thing, is everybody kind of said, the signage was kind of crappy, and they should probably kind of consolidate the room so that you can kind of find most of the show instead of having to go on these scavenger hunts. So that was the first thing. But other than that, I'm going to say good show. It could have been more heavily attended, and I know this is kind of sensitive. Everybody wants to say, oh, there's a million people there, but wasn't a lot of people there, which is not unexpected. I mean, usually the first year an audio show takes off, it could be, sometimes it's people don't get the word yet, and that may have been what happened here. And I think people are a little skittish still about going to high-end audio shows, especially because there have been some spikes in COVID, so they weren't, maybe that was part of it. But on the other hand, it wasn't like Munich where I was, we were just packing the rooms with a bunch of people. It was nice and spacious, and I felt like social distancing was carried out. And I also think that, saw a lot more masks than I did in Munich and even in Exmona in April.
So, yeah, unfortunately, there always are like whispers on the wind of tiny little outbreaks at each show, but obviously none of them have been like super verified, and hasn't been a massive issue. But little rumors trickle out here and there about
they do.
A couple of people getting it at every show. So it is a concern. Everybody stay safe, obviously, as you can. But yeah, so there have been a couple of little things and this and that have come out of these shows. Hopefully none of the new one, though, none of the monkeypox. And sounds even very unpleasant. So you have the show, you have setup day, we have a bit of a scavenger hunt, as you said, to go through. What was the first room that you landed on where you said, "Oh man, this is what I love. This is what this is what I'm looking for"?
Well, we got to talk about von Schweikert then, because I always check in there first anyways.
All right, let's get it out of the way.
Okay, so it's kind of hard if von Schweikert and VAC and all the other associated brands that they bring, and Kronos and Esoteric, Masterbuilt Cables, HANA cartridge, and all that stuff is, if they're at a show, it's going to be hard to beat them. One of the interesting things about this year's show is that they've been steadily scaling down the speakers, and I'm talking about, of course, Leif Swanson and David von Schweikert, who are the two main, and they're buds. So I always check in with them. I want to see them and see what's going on. And so it seems like they've been downscaling. So they were doing the Ultra 11s for a long time, $320,000 a pair, and then they went down to the Ultra 9s for a while, and those are $220,000 a pair. And now they're on the Ultra 7s, which they showed at this show and the last couple shows. They did an Expona, $180,000 a pair. And this was, by the way, the same pair of blue Ultra 7s that Dave McNair had at his house. And if you read our HubCom coverage from a few weeks ago in North Carolina, where many of the writers for PTA went and hung out in North Carolina, and that was one of the speakers that they listened to. So it's the same exact pair that they had was at this show. And I thought, first of all, it was a big room. So this room was 70 by 70 by 14, something like that. This is bigger than their very famous Capital Audio show, the Capital Audio Fest, where they have that monster room that I always talk about. The one they had in Axpona was almost cut in half. Still a big room, but almost half the volume. This room was the biggest room they'd ever done, and yet they used a smaller Ultra 7 speakers, and of course they didn't break a sweat. They filled the room and energized it and gave everybody. And there were a lot of comments that I heard, too, about people who, like me, visit them with every show, and just saying that this particular one was one of the best sounding demos that they've ever done. For whatever reason, it wasn't quite the $1.5 million system that I usually bring. It was a pared down a little bit for smaller speakers, but still probably at least $1 million. And so it was a big, ambitious system that very few people could match. But this time they kind of keep bettering themselves. And just to kind of this downsizing attitude is Damon was talking about maybe bringing the ESCs, which were the pair I had. So these are very reasonable $35,000 speakers.
Very reasonable.
Yeah, and Damon von Schweikert is like saying, no, we got to go big or go home. And so it'll be interesting to see what's at the next show. This downsizing with these guys with more and more realistic systems. I don't know if it's going to be a trend or not, but I think we should keep our eye on it.
All right, number 2. What was your number 2?
Okay, so this is something that, like, when I just sit down and talk about the sound that I just really got into, like I was just really hooked and I was in there. And it's a familiar room, and this we're talking about linear tube audio. And linear tube audio with spatial audio lab speakers. And they had 2 new models. So the LTA was the new Z40 Plus integrated. And this is different from the past Z40 just because Mark Schneider of LTA has gone and looked at David Burning's more elaborate designs, his so-called high-end audio designs, and tried to closely emulate that design a little bit more, stick closer to it. So he said when he looked at these newer, more ambitious designs, he still found the same similarities in the circuitry and everything, but there were, I think he was saying there was a lot, the Burning had a lot more capacitors, so he tried adding some things and following more closely, and it lifted the performance up substantially. And so we're talking about that with the Spatial Audio Labs X4 speakers, which is a new model, brand new model. The X4s were a little bit bigger. They usually show one of the 3 series, but this is bigger, more expensive. So we're talking about the Z40 was about, and both of them actually, the Z40 and the Spatial X4s, just short of $8,000. And why that's important is that this system that they usually show at shows, LTA and spatial audio, and it's usually either holo audio or a lampizator DAC, and of course anti-wires cabling. They could usually put together a system for anywhere from $10,000 to $12,000 that is simply, I mean, nothing else touches it for that kind of money. I can't put together a system that sounds better than that one for $10,000 or $12,000. And it was always kind of a show special thing, like buy it as a package, $12,000. It was just an astounding deal. So this is a system that they were showing, and again, it was the Holo Audio Maydac, the same one that Grover Neville reviewed. It was $20,000 for the entire system, basically. So we're thinking, is it twice as good? And I'm going to say, before you sit there and you say, this is one of the best sounding systems for this kind of money I've ever heard. But with this newer system, it was like listening to just like a best of show contender. Like this is one of the best rooms I heard. I was really drawn into the music. I was really just sitting there. I mean, Mark Schneider was sitting with me. I just turned to him and I just said, this is unbelievable. This is the best I've ever heard. And LTA, I mean, I love LTA, but this is the best combination I've ever heard. Just an amazing, amazing system for not a lot of money, relatively for our industry. But $20,000 is considered nothing by most audiophiles.
We realize we're talking about the price of a decent running car, but in terms of reference for what's at an audio show, what the crowd attaches itself to, we're talking relatively here, folks. So we know that it's
yeah, we know
$20,000 is a ton. But when you're at a show and you're looking at all these pieces, you really kind of get a sense that a lot of these products land around these type of budgets. That's like that makes up a majority of the rooms. There are absolutely budget things to be had, things under $1,000, things under $5,000, and you can find those rooms. But a lot of times when we talk about the shows, we're talking about, right now, we're talking about best of show. So obviously the price is going to be on the higher end of things. That's what we're running down. But please do not mistake our banter here for snobbery or the assumption that everyone needs to spend that much money. It is absolutely not essential to spend that much money.
It's just the world we live in, so to speak. It's like, So you walk into your average room in a high-end audio show, it's probably the whole system is going to retail for at least $50,000. What looks like a basic system. When you start adding everything up together, it's some pretty big money, expensive luxury car money in most cases.
And this year, too, since we've done a lot of show coverage and talk a lot of high-end, we will be including a bunch of entry-level stuff, advice, top 10s, this kind of thing. So we will definitely include a bit more of those for those other people. If you like what I like to sometimes to do, even though I can't afford something, I still like to hear about it. I still like to talk and look and do these things what they would call aspirational, right? Like I can't drive the greatest sports car in the world, but I still want to read about it.
Right.
So that's part of why we bring this information to you as well, is that we like to talk about what's the guideline, what's the benchmark, what are we ultimately all looking for from our music. So that's part of it.
You have to look at that like when the Von Schweikert room, you go to a Von Schweikert room and it's $1.5 million system or whatever, but that's not the way to look at it. The way to look at it is for $15 or $20 or even sometimes free, you can walk into a room and sit down and stay as long as you want and listen to that system.
Exactly.
For one day, for 50.
It's entertainment, right? We're talking.
It's a gift.
We're talking about.
I always
product.
say it's a gift. So if you hate the prices, it's okay. That's why high-end audio shows are so fantastic. It's a way for you to get to hear this stuff and hear what it sounds like, even for afternoon. And what is that worth to you? Especially if you go to 50 rooms or go to 150 rooms or, like some of the bigger shows. It's worth it, to me at least, is to be able to sit down and listen to Von Schweikert's $1 Million System and just sit there all day and maybe even ask them to play something for me. So that's something, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah. For me, it's like two things. One, it's pure entertainment, like a movie, right? It's acoustic theatricalness. And two, it gives you, and this is something I've learned over the years too, it gives you an opportunity to find out what it is you like about music.
Oh, yeah.
You love about fidelity. Sometimes the crazy thing is you don't know what you're missing till you hear it on one of these systems. When you hear mega dynamic, ultra detailed music, you're like, oh, now I know what I like. I'm going to go chase after that dragon in the system I want. So it might not be the healthiest thing for your wallet, but at least you kind of get a sense of what you want out of the hobby, right?
Well, the thing is that, and a lot of people don't want to say this, but you as an audiophile will learn more about a gear, a specific product, by going to an audio show or by going to a dealer and listening for yourself than you do reading reviews. Because reading reviews, you don't hear it. You got to get out and hear this stuff. And you might realize you're a tube guy when you've been listening to solid state all your life. Or you might realize, you don't know just how good vinyl can sound. You've never heard a really high-class rig. Or streaming, how good streaming can sound. How much high, all these things, you read about them, but it doesn't make any sense to read about them and then never go out and hear them. That's what these audio shows are for. So we should be going to these. If you're interested in this stuff, spend the $15-20 and educate yourself. It's amazing.
And it's a good time to talk to your fellow audiophiles, learn stuff,
make friends,
the
make
community.
New friends, absolutely.
Yeah, have a drink at the bar, Today's episode is also sponsored by INNUOS. INNUOS develops high-fidelity digital music players that are transforming the way we listen to music. Every nuance and detail is revealed, allowing one to experience their music like never before. Enjoy your own library of CDs and high-resolution files, and access to all the content in the world through streaming services and internet radio. All at your fingertips through an exceedingly simple user interface on a mobile device. Visit INNUOS.com to learn more. That's www.INNUOS.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by one of the originals in high-end audio, Purist Audio Designs. Purist Audio Design made the first fluid-shielded audio cable over 35 years ago and still makes them today right here in the U.S. For over 35 years, Purist Audio has connected you to the music. They passionately make high-end, high-crafted audio cables designed specifically to the needs of your system. They list their specs, such as resistance and shield quality, and you can find them at PURISTAUDIODESING.com. Purist Audio Designed is veteran-owned and available worldwide. Okay, Mark, let me ask you this. What was the best sounding budget system you heard at the show? I'm springing this one on you. You got it in your back pocket there?
No, I do not, because I'm going to tell you something. Because I feel like this was really dominated by expensive systems. Okay, I'll tell you one thing, though. My good friend Brad Serhan from Australia, one of the Australia's finest speaker designers over the years. I used to represent his speakers. I have a pair. I have the reference Brigadier's Audio. I've been using them as a reference since like 2014, 2015. They're just amazing. So Brad started kind of a new company with Morris Swift, who's an engineer, and he's also, I think he's president of the Sydney Audiophile Society. But anyways, they've been working together. When I visited them in Sydney in 2015, I met Morris, and they were already working on this speaker they were showing, and the company is called Serhan Swift, the two of their names. This speaker, they originally was called the MU1, and this was a two-way small monitor, scan speak drivers, and they sounded really nice. I mean, my pair of speakers, it's a big 7-inch magnesium driver with a RAL ribbon tweeter, so it's a little bit different. This is more of a conventional looking speaker, but it sounded great. We all thought it sounded great. And so the idea was, Brad always wanted to come back to the market, the global market, with an affordable speaker. That sounded really good, and that showed off his talent. So this finally got to the U.S. for the first time at Pacific Audio Fest, and we got to see the current version, which is called the MU2 Mark II. I heard the Mark 1. I heard a prototype in 2015. So this is obviously evolved from what I heard. It is a dynamic little speaker. Retails for $8,000, so that seems like a lot, again, to the normal folk out there. But to tell you the truth, they had a system there where Morris had plugged in Brad's speakers. It was sitting on a table, so tabletop, desktop system, whatever you want to call it. So it was a Chromebook, a $50 DAC. It was an LKV power amplifier, and it was a pair of these speakers, and that thing almost beat out the big system that they had in the room. I mean, it was scary, just the way the music just leapt out. I mean, everything's pushed up against the wall, too. It's the way it grabbed you. It was like you were sitting in a room with a big system, and it was totally amazing. And so you're talking about $8,000 pair of speakers, but hooked up to a very inexpensive surrounding system and getting absolutely amazing sound. So I'm going to have to point that one out.
Also, any other new products that you ran into along the way? That sounds like a new product to market. What else was like fresh? I love the smell of new product releases in the morning.
So I'm in Munich. Over the years, I haven't been in their room very much. The Denmark Audio Group, and they do the AVIC, which is the amplification, the ANSUS, which is the cabling, and the Borison, which are the speakers. And people, most people in this industry know about Borison. They know about the Borison Rado story, whatever that is. So the Borison M1s, I've been trying to get in this room forever, and somebody else always went in there instead. So I wasn't that familiar until I went in Munich, and since I was the only one in Munich, I said, hey, I'm finally going to get to hear some of this sound and see what it's all about. So they had a pair of two-ways in there. They kind of look like the Rado two-way, the little tiny speakers and everything. And so I didn't know how much, I went in there not knowing how much they were. And what makes the speaker so unbelievable is they're small two-way monitors, but you close your eyes and it's like you're sitting in front of a pair of Wilsons. It's just the most amazing thing. It's just, you'll have an existential crisis listening to these speakers, just like going, do I know anything? Do I, is everything I've learned a lie? What does it mean? Because it's amazing, and it has a lot to do with the technology. It has a lot to do with the titanium combs that they use. And I'm actually, in a couple weeks, I'm going to Denmark, and I'm going to visit their factory. I'm going to see the making, and I'm going to see the insides. I'm going to see whatever magic fairy it is they've put in these things, because they're unbelievable. So I was totally whacked out. I get home, write the show report on these, and still never knowing the price. And I think the reason I didn't know the price is because they announced it at the show and I missed it. So anyways, I knew they had a pair of two-ways that were really expensive, and they were $55,000 a pair. And I said, I don't know if these were that expensive, but I know they're going to be expensive, right? Well, I found out that the Borison M1s were $100,000 for basically a pair of mini monitors. And so this is the kind of product where you listen and you go, you have to listen. Don't look at them. Don't look at them. Listen to them. Are you getting $100,000 worth of sound? And oh boy, you are. I think about all these six-figure speakers out there that are huge, that have cabinets that weigh 700 pounds, and they're 8 feet tall and all this. And then you look at these things, and they're just little two-ways on a stand. They're beautiful. They're sleek. But this is a new product that I feel like they're trying to get me to review these, and I would have to put velvet ropes around them in my house because don't breathe on them. $100,000.
I feel like your dog does need a new chew toy. You told me.
No. Well, she's really good. She's never heard anything. She's too low to the ground. She can't get up to things. But this thing is just unbelievable, and it's like I'm the guy who's been looking for the perfect two-way bookshelf speaker forever, and I think I found it. It's $100,000, but it doesn't matter. It sounds like $100,000, and I'm sure it's worth it. So I'll be spending more time, over the rest of the year on this. But that is the new product that has come out this year that has just blown my mind. Not to use a cliche, but oh my God.
Right. If you guys follow the show, you know that Mark has been on a lifelong journey to find the perfect studio monitor.
I have. And it's not even about studio monitors as much, although they tend to kind of pop in there a lot. But it's just, we've talked about this before, but it just came from being when I was a young audiophile and couldn't afford the good stuff. And I lived in small apartments. I would always try to have as best sound I could in a little tiny one-bedroom apartment, and that's how I did it. Another new product that's really interesting is in Mod Right. So we know Dan Wright. He's a great guy. Mod Right makes really good stuff. So he came out with something called the Analog Bridge. The Analog Bridge is basically a tube buffer. $2,900, which, I mean, I've seen tube buffers for $100, but they come from some unknown source. This is a quality tube. It allows you different kinds of tube buffers. You can use the tube rectifier, or you can go with the 6922 or the 6SN7. And these are all independent stages in the thing, so you can switch it. You don't have to swap out tubes or anything. Turn a knob and you get them.
Really?
It's all fully balanced, unity gain, and it's a really interesting product. So Dan was kind of doing a lot of ABs. And so basically what this is doing is that it's giving you some tube sound. It's not giving you tube sound. And it's really funny because he went through a couple tracks, and at first the differences were not large. And a lot of it has to do with he was streaming, and so it's hard to tell what exactly is happening. But he finally got to one, and it was the old audiophile warhorse. It was Shelby Lynn, Just a Little Lovin', which I've heard a million times. I own it. I used to play it at shows. And so that's where the big differences came out, with a truly outstanding recording. And what happened was when Dan went from one of the tube stages to taking it out of the system, bypassing the analog bridge, her voice hardened up slightly. And I'm not sure I would have noticed it if I had never heard the analog bridge in there. It still sounded nice. He had an SME turntable, he had Revell speakers, he had Cardis audio. It was already a really strong system and it sounded great. But what it did was it gave me, when he flipped that switch, it gave me some of the tube warmth and softness and textures that I feel like I need. So this is something I'd like to try out, because like I said, it's hard to A/B it. You have to spend time with it and to find out exactly what it can do. I've never been that impressed with the idea of a tube buffer, but this is a very interesting product and it's extremely well made.
Tell me about, I heard Joseph Audio was there. How did his room sound?
Okay, so here's the thing about Joseph Audio. It's the third time I've heard pretty much the same system this year. So, I heard it at Expona. I heard it in Munich. It actually sounded better in Munich, but like I said, the room sounded better there. Here, it was a funny story because it was a last-minute thing for Jeff, where he got a call 2 weeks before and somebody had canceled, and it was a big room. And Jeff Joseph, despite the fact that his speakers are just beautiful in the bass and everything, he doesn't necessarily go to the big rooms, but he took this one. They gave him a good price.
Right.
So he set up this same system in one of the big downstairs ballroom. And so you'll have to see my photographs of when I do the show report on this room. But he had a pair of his, Pearl Graphenes, $44,000 a pair, nice speakers, and he had the Dacia Audio, and he had the Cardis, and everything else that he usually has, reel to reel. Beautiful sound in a gigantic room. And Jeff didn't spread it out like some of the other guys do, where they have this big giant display. It was a system that usually would go into a smaller room and a big room, and it didn't make any difference. And so you'll see the photographs I took, where some of the photographs I really, really kind of make fun of how small the system is within this gigantic room. And it was funny to look at it. But here's the funny thing is I went in the room twice, had the big Pearl, the graphenes in there, but he also had the Pulsar graphenes in there, which are his two-way monitor. And everybody knows that the Pulsars are one of the most powerful sounding, dynamic two-way speakers on, in high-end audio. And in this room, they were like, hey, no problem. So there was a difference, obviously, between the sound of the two speakers. One energized the room a lot better, but still the Pulsar was amazingly competent in this room. And the Pearl graphenes were just amazing. So for me, hearing this system, this very, very good system, 3 times this year, this is the one that will stick with me. Like, just superb sound.
As reviewers, too, we always are kind of, reviewers and listeners, we're always kind of looking for that thing to define what we hear. And I feel like from my experience, it echoes what you're saying right now, Mark, with the Pulsar speaker. It was one of the very first stand mount speakers I heard, where it made no difference to me if it was a floor stander or a stand mount. The size didn't seem relevant to the speaker.
You're
it was
absolutely
a big
right.
sound from a small speaker. And that is what, in my mind, defines that speaker. There's so many things to think about, to listen to, and that exact element is like screams from that thing. It does that thing you just said better than any other stand mount I've ever heard.
It does. I reviewed them about 3 years ago, and they're just the kind of speaker that puts a big smile on your face every time you hear them because they do so many things right. They're warm, but they have extraordinary bass for a two-way.
Yeah,
they're just magical. So one of my favorite two-ways, and they don't cost $100,000 a pair.
What do they cost?
I think
what the graphenes cost?
I think everybody. It's hard to track because everybody's prices are skyrocketing right now just because of the world. But when I reviewed them, they were about $9,000 a pair, and that was about 3 years ago. So somewhere in that ballpark. They're probably still under $10,000 a pair, I would imagine, and so worth it. I mean, one of my favorite monitors at that price point.
I'm looking it up right now, but I bet you they don't have it on here. The Pro.
Everybody's prices. So I've had so many instances where I've written up a review and publish it, and then I get a phone call the day after it says, "Oh, the prices are different now." So it's just the world right now, and hopefully it'll stabilize. But everything costs more these days.
Ay caramba. You're correct in that your review says 9,000, but now I'm looking at them at ExecutiveStereo.com, and they're listed at $13,650.
Wow. See, that's a big uptick.
Does this come with a stand?
I don't believe so. I don't think Jeff has a stand, but he has recommendations. I want to say he uses sound anchors. That gives you an idea of just the supply chain issues and what it does. Inflation is real.
Congratulations to everyone who already owned a pair, I guess.
You got a deal.
It's like owning a used car these days. My, oh my.
Yep.
Okay, so we got Joseph. We got a couple of great ones. We got some new product releases. Anything left in the bucket bin for new product releases?
Nope, not really, but I did have a fun story to tell you about the Audio Note room. And
lay it on me, brother.
I dig Audio Note. I know we were just having a discussion in the PTA war room. It's polarizing. Some people like it. Some people are impressed. I'll admit that I really like Audio Note a lot. I have been to shows where they sounded strange, and I've been to shows where they sounded amazing. So when you set up Audio Note, it's kind of a idiosyncratic process. The speakers want to be placed in corners, and there's a lot of different things about Audio Note. You have to treat it differently. I hadn't heard Audio Note for so long that I want to go into a room and sit down and listen to it. So I did, and I'm listening, and they have the ANEs, and they have the usual suspects, a really nice system. And I'm listening to it and enjoying it. They had an Audio Note turntable. I think they make fantastic turntables and cartridges as well. So I'm sitting in the room, and then I notice over the corner is a cello. And I go, oh, that's right. Vincent, I'm sorry if I pronounce this right. I don't speak a lick of French, but Belanger. I could just call him Belanger, and he'd probably wince at that. But super nice guy. So I knew he was at the show, and Besson was also at the show, and the two of them did a really great duet album a few years ago. That's one of my reference tracks. So it was kind of fun to see him here. I know that there are people from PTA who have met him. He's now kind of a spokesperson, ambassador for Audio Note. And so one of the things he does at the shows now is that he comes in with his cello, plays a track, and then they play something on the CD player from his latest release or whatever it is. And then there's a special track that they've come up with so he plays kind of a trio with himself. So he's playing, and then they're playing a recording. Anyways, I'm sitting there, and I realize he comes in the room, and he starts setting up, and I go, oh, they're getting ready to do this. And the next thing you know, they tell me that this was on Friday, so it was real slow, but it was like, oh, just you? Guess you're getting a show by, a special exclusive show all by yourself. And so I was the only one there. And I found out later they had actually closed the door, which was like, okay, maybe he didn't want to be interrupted while he's playing. I'm sure it wasn't for me, but it made me feel like it was for me. It
was a pretty princess.
Yeah, I was all happy and everything, but it was just amazing. So he sits down, he starts playing, which is nice, and then they'll play the same piece from his recording. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that sounds good. You obviously hear a difference. But then, like I said, he has a specially mixed recording where he sits, and it sounds like there's two of them on either side of him, like three cellos all playing this song. And at that point, the differences between live and recorded were more interesting because of the way it blended so seamlessly together. I could still hear the difference between the two, the way it interacted with the room, but at the same time, the music flowed and it wasn't disjointed at all. and it was amazing. And so I really enjoyed that a lot. And for me, that was a real highlight of the show, because that people do that all the time, where they come in and they play live versus recording, and you get to do that. And that's always a fun demo. But this was really cool, and I dig his music anyway. So, but that was kind of fun. So if you have a chance to go to a show and he's going to be bouncing around the rooms, or Anne Besant does the same. She does the same thing a lot. Lynn Stanley has been known to do that, and that's what happened there. It's enjoyable. I had a good time. I'm good. I'm happy I came into that room when I did.
I find that exceptionally interesting, because I think, and I don't like to admit this too often, that sometimes I've been duped by stereos thinking, oh, I think not in the same room, but in another room. I'm like, oh, I wonder if they're doing the live demo. And I run in there and it's the stereo. See, this is a huge deal to me. If I can be duped from the second room to go in there and think it's a live one, that's a hell of a stereo. Now,
absolutely, I've run into that before too.
Now, I'm not going to claim that it happens when I'm in the room. So if I'm in the room, I'm like, oh man, this sounds exactly real.
The next room is a really good test. If you think it's live from the next room, then chances are it's going to be a really good system. You're absolutely right.
And so, I've seen Lynn Stanley has come in before while I was in the room and done some singing, and it's always a treat to kind of do those things. And there's I forget the guy's name, but there was a guy who did the guitar work quite a bit. He came in and did a lot with a couple of brands. That was an excellent guitar player. So, yeah, live music. A couple of shows do it, even at the shows. I think Exponent has live bands play each time, so if you can get in.
There's usually live music.
There's some music.
Well, Haley Loren played, and I missed it, unfortunately. I was out to dinner with some people. But Haley Loren she's like a jazz vocalist. And I've known her for years. I got introduced to her from Dan Muskies, who used to run Blackbird Audio. And, I reviewed one of her albums way back, and she was really nice and sweet about it and wrote me a letter. I always wanted to meet her. I could have met her, and I was already booked, which was kind of a shame. And people came down saying it was awesome. So I missed that, but there's always good music at these shows.
I've been invited to perform at an audio show as well, but with everything going on and all the work I have to do, I haven't really had the time for it. But we were joking that it would be very fun to get together with, like, me, David Solomon on drums, the gentleman from Cobuzz. He plays some pretty good drums. And maybe, like John Atkinson on bass. I hear he's a bass player.
No, he's a good bass player.
Do a little jazz trio in the corner, that'd be fun.
Oh, the guy.
Maybe someday.
The guy who did Spiral Groove, Alan, I'm going to forget his name. But he is a superb drummer as well. I've heard him play. So it's really funny because my birthday's in a couple days from now, and one of my gifts, I'm not supposed to know it yet, but is a cajon. You know what cajones are, right? It's the wooden box.
I think I got two of them. Why?
Yeah. So I always wanted one. I've been really...
No, I'm thinking cajones. What's a cajon?
Cajones. No. Muy diferente. No, a cajon is it's basically just a wooden box. It's a hollow wooden box, and you sit on it and you smack it with your hand, and it's becoming a very popular percussion instrument. I'm hearing it more and more in the music. I'm saying that's a cajon right there, and it's really cheap. I mean, easily you could probably make one yourself, but they have lots of brands, and you get them. You get a basic one for $100, and a great one is $500. It's like having a little drum set, and because it's open on the bottom and facing down to the ground as you play it, it can really generate some bass under your feet. And it's a really... I got to play one in Hawaii a couple years ago, and I was hooked. And so now I'm getting one. So I'll be your cajon player.
There you
give
go.
You a little slap, get a little wood slap, a little bass and a wood slap.
That sounds like a little great acoustic thing we could do. We'll just sit down and...
Yeah.
Well, guys, we'll record an album, and we'll do a new intro song, you and I. I think we'll just bang something out.
Yeah.
So, final thoughts for you, Mark, on the show. What do you think?
Final thoughts are good show. Going to come back next year. They'll iron out things, but that's just, silly to assume that they wouldn't. This is the first time out. I think for a first-time show, awesome job. Louis Hinckley, Gary Gill, all the people involved with it. It's a promising show. Everybody likes Seattle. It's a great town. It's a great place to be in. Usually it's a great place in the summer. Not this year, though. I really am rooting for it. I'm really pulling for it that it's a big success. In spirit, it could easily turn into the next Rocky Mountain just for that, the family feel and the warm feel, and the people are happy to be there. And so I'm optimistic. I think we need more shows on the West Coast anyways. Now that I'm here, on the West Coast, it's like I want more shows to go to. So, like I said, I'm just totally rooting for these guys that it becomes a success and they do it for many years to come.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because me in Los Angeles here, I'm like, I think we got enough. We've had like a rotating cycle of shows that everybody is like,
and you know what? And
it's like the opposite for everybody else,
right? But the LA has been so unstable for years, where shows come and go and everything, and new shows are trying to get started. And I think in LA just needs a really good, like Rocky Mountain kind of thing, where it's the big show every year. And I would love to go down to the Long Beach show. If it turns into this huge juggernaut that nobody could compete with, that would be nice. But there are other shows that are on the horizon, so we don't know who's going to wind up. And it's been like that down there for a while now. It's just, one show becomes big and then the other show jumps in and then they split off. So hopefully the politics, they get over it and they do something really good, because LA is a great town for audiophiles. And a lot of good high-end dealers in Los Angeles.
Yeah, all true.
Yep.
Mark.
Ryan.
Thank you so much for your input. It's great to see you.
Great to see you too.
Before we let you go, we want to talk about what you got coming up. You got some stuff coming up, don't you? Shows.
Okay. The only show that I really plan on doing for the rest of the year is Capital Audio Fest, which is in November. It's the last show of the year. It's in Maryland, Washington, D.C. area. And I like going to that show just because it's like our home show. So Scott Cole used to be in the area. I mean, we've all moved away, but the North Carolina crew at PTA, they all drive up, and a bunch of us show up, and we hang out. We have great fun. And so that's the next show I'm probably going to go to, and that's in November. But before that, I'm actually going to have a major adventure here in a couple of weeks where I'm going to Denmark. It's kind of funny because I originally was just going to fly in for a couple of days, and it's turned into an expedition because not only have other manufacturers in Denmark have jumped in and wanted to see me, but because the downtime in between the scheduled events is big enough to where I'm going to have some adventures in Denmark. So I'm going to start off, we were talking about Audio Denmark Group, and that's Avik, Ensaz, and Borison. And like I said, I'm going to find out how they're making those incredible $100,000 MIDI monitors and what goes into them. And then from there, I'm going to go see Dolly. Dolly is going to introduce a brand new flagship speaker. And so I'll be looking into that. And then finally, I'm working on a third company right now. They've approached me. I'm not going to mention anything yet, but it's another Danish company. It's not Dyn Audio. That's the only other Danish company I can think of right now. Gamut is Danish. I mean, there's a lot of Danish companies, but I'm waiting for them to all jump in. But for right now, I'm either going to be sitting on a beach, on a Danish beach, in an Airbnb for days, or I'm going to be visiting a lot of factories. So we'll see what happens.
Before we close, I also wanted to bring up, you just got back from another location. You were had a new product launch too.
Yeah, this is a secret, so we have to wait till September 21st. It's on Motorium. I can't tell you about it.
Okay, well, let's just keep that out of it then.
Yeah, but there's something big.
I thought they sent me the press release, though. I saw it.
Well, maybe because you're a journalist. They were trying to lure you into their den too, but it's a big company. It's a new line of products. And it was very good, and I think that's all I can say. I can't say anything until September 21st.
Yeah. You should say, Brian, watch your embargoes. You almost blew the lid off this sucker.
Yeah, I did that when I first came to part-time a while ago. I blew a moratorium, and I didn't get anything from the company. I got nasty stuff from other high-end audio websites.
You don't want to break those. Like, it's not good for the manufacturer, but like, yeah, it really angers a lot of the other sites. That's what no one really talks about. Oh boy, just get people mad.
I should have just said, no, I'm special. I can do whatever I want. I'm Marc Phillips. So,
do you know who I am?
Don't you know who I am?
I'm very important.
Very busy, very important. My time is important.
Mark, thanks so much for joining us, man. I appreciate your importance, and I appreciate your greatness greatly.
Oh, my gosh. Thank you. Thank you.
The Occasional Podcast is a production of the Part-Time Audiophile Network, which includes PartTimeAudiophile.com, The Occasional Magazine, the PTA Newsletter, and AudioHead.com. You can stay in touch with us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. The Occasional Podcast is produced and hosted by Brian Hunter, executive produced by Scott Hall at PTA Productions. The Occasional Podcast and its original associated music is monitored, mixed, and mastered on the Focal Trio 6 BE studio monitors. If you haven't already, Please subscribe to the Occasional Podcast on iTunes, Google, Spotify, or wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.